Well, I remember seeing the third installment of the Indiana Jones movies entitled The Last Crusade. I wish it was The Last Crusade for that swashbuckling hero, because it would have ended the series on a high note, but instead they, of course, as Hollywood does, tried to suck more money out of us, and they made that embarrassing sequel, The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull Nightmare. Did you see that one? Don't bother, okay? It was just, brutal. It was exciting, I think, to see Harrison Ford put on his Han Solo outfit one last time in the Force Awakens Star Wars movie. And, I thought it would be the same to see him don his brown hat again. But that movie was a dud. Just terrible insert of aliens in Earth's past, him surviving a nuclear explosion inside a refrigerator. Nah, do your math, come on. But The Last Crusade, it was a fun flick. It helped, of course, to have Sir Sean Connery in the cast as Indy's dad. Not only is he just awesome by himself, but at the time, in the 80s, my dad and he could have been twins. So me, of course, being the offspring of the original James Bond, it's obvious, right? My rugged good looks and chiseled jawline, of course. But the movie was about the discovery of the Holy Grail, that supposed cup that Jesus drank from during that Last Supper he had with his disciples. And legend had told that it had been imbued with these supernatural abilities to heal and, of course, provide eternal life. Now, Jesus, of course, is the only one who can offer that, but that's not the direction the movie writers went. So, of course, Dr. Jones Sr. and Jr. work together to piece together the puzzle that leads them to discovering where the Holy Grail is. Add in your mix of bad guys and good fight scenes, and the peak of the plot is reached when Indiana has to figure out his way through these different tests that were designed to allow only worthy people to find the cup. Of course, he deduces the puzzles, he gets to the final challenge, which is somehow getting across this bottomless chasm with seemingly no bridge and no way to climb across. The legend says that only a leap of faith will allow those who are worthy to reach the other side. And so Indy takes a deep breath. He closes his eyes and he puts his hand over his heart. And then he lifts up a foot and then allows it to fall into what seems like certain death. Except his foot hits something solid. At first it appears that he's kind of floating in midair, but as the camera pans to the side, the audience gets to see the miracle in action. There's actually a bridge built out of the rock, but the angle and the distance to it makes it appear invisible. So our hero crosses this illusion, he finds the cup, and if you want to know the ending, you'll just have to watch it for yourselves. But I recall watching that scene as a young lad and pondering this leap of faith he took. It looked all miraculous, and his pause beforehand, it seemed to be genuinely spiritual, searching inwards for this faith deep down, and then trusting that he would be saved from harm. It was kind of a cool scene. And after all, didn't Jesus say something like, if we had faith even as small as a tiny mustard seed, we'd be able to move mountains? But as a spiritually cynical youth, and still today as a hopefully a bit wiser but still cynical adult, I just have to wonder in that scene, where did he place his faith in? You know what I mean? He was told to have faith in order to cross this chasm, but it never said who or what that faith was supposed to be placed in. I suppose everyone has faith in something, right? Every person that climbs into an airplane, they are placing their faith in the skills of the pilots who are driving that huge chunk of metal hurtling through the air at 500 miles plus an hour. They're placing their faith in the engineers who designed the craft, the workers who made sure to tighten all of those screws and never assume that planes are like barbecues. There's always just a few left over, right? They're just extras. Most frequent flyers trust that the plane's been refueled. The guy at the pump wasn't feeling lazy and just, assumed and hoped that there was still enough in the tank to get them to their destination. Am I freaking you out about flying this week, Roy?
Not just him, you're not being helpful.
But there's faith, right? Huge amount of faith. But I guess we know in that case where your faith is placed in. Every time I gyp rock a high ceiling, I have to trust that the designers of the benches that we use knew what they were doing. David has this extendable plank that will walk across, sometimes over a long ways down. I'm not a big height fan. And the sticker on the plank says there's like a 300-pound maximum? Something like that, And when we are both on there, we have faith that they've over-engineered this thing, because when the two of us are on it, combined we're a tad over 300 pounds. We'll just leave it at that. When my doctor tells me that I need to take medication that's going to play around with my heart rate, I'm trusting that the guy paid attention in medical school and knows the proper dosage, right? Children have faith in their parents that they'll look after them. Never as a kid did I ever wonder if I was going to eat today. There's so many things and people that we place our faith in every day, and yet, while many of those have earned our trust, many of them have also broken it. Because planes crash, don't they? Not very often. And the tail always survives. So get a seat near the tail, up near the back. It's always sticking out of the mountain, right? Doctors make wrong decisions, and people die as a result. That's why their insurance premiums are crazy high. And parents, well, sadly, there's a lot of kids out there who have been failed by and hurt by that. We're going through the letter in our New Testaments written by James, the half-brother of Jesus. And today he presents to us this concept of faith, of placing our trust in someone, but making sure that we know who it is so that we can do it with full confidence. We pick up in James chapter 1, verse 5 through 8, where he says, "If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking, but when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that's blown and tossed by the wind. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do." Wisdom is a commodity, I think, desperately needed by a lot of people. I have no idea if Dr. Phil is even still on television or not, but I always appreciated his common sense approach to everyday life and the problems that people brought to him. This couple would come on the show, they'd have these issues, these crazy issues, and they were messed up. The husband's working 80 hours a week, supposedly to provide for his family, but his family, as a result, never sees him. Now, the wife has been having, a couple of affairs on the side with guys from the office, stuff like that. And Phil hears about all of their problems, most of the time brought on by their own decisions. And then he asks them that famous question, well, how's that working for you? Remember that? Because most issues are not the result of, childhood issues being suppressed or mental health problems brought on by a chemical imbalance. Most of them are, I cheated on my spouse and I don't know why they don't trust me anymore. I spent way more money than I earned and somehow I have all this debt lagging me. What's going on in my life? Why, God? Decisions were made that were bad choices that resulted in consequences that are currently not being enjoyed. But instead of thinking, hey, maybe I need to make better choices, people will instead, they'll question, they'll even get mad at God and say, why is this happening to me? So James makes this suggestion that we all need a little more wisdom. And to get that wisdom, we should ask God for it. Of course, that may make us ask the question, what is wisdom? Well, wisdom is not just accumulated knowledge, right? A person can go to school, they can earn degrees, they can even do great on Jeopardy, but knowing facts is different than having wisdom. There's a lot of smart people in our world who make very poor decisions. I saw a survey done recently around this area asking people if they drove after smoking cannabis. And it was something like 70% asked that said, yes, they do. I was like, yikes, that's a lot of people. Every weekend when I walk the dogs around, I see several empty beer cans or plastic vodka bottles on the side of the road in our area, which means the night before someone was driving near my house, near my family, drinking. And I have known personally, I'm sure you have too, known so many families devastated as a result of car accidents and someone being hurt or killed because of these decisions. Everybody knows this happens, right? There's so much publicity, the government spends tons of money on advertising. Don't drink, don't drive high. And yet, with all of these families devastated, wrecked, people apparently drive drunk and high all the time. Wisdom is something desperately needed by us. Now, of course, wisdom can grow with experience. That's not always the case, but usually they say with age comes wisdom, right? Most cultures in the world, except ours, it appears, hold age in a very high respect. A person with gray hair has gone through life and they've learned a lot. They've earned that respect. They've learned how to cope in various situations, how to work with all sorts of different kinds of people. That's why in the Bible, when it speaks of leaders, it uses terms like elder to describe them. Literally, that word means older person. It's not that complicated. Not someone with business or finance management experience, which tends to be our go-to thing, is what we look for in a leader, right? Because if they can run a successful business and they've made lots and lots of money, they obviously should lead at church, right? Well, maybe, but that's not what Jesus places as a character trait. Wisdom is a much better one. And while time and experience can teach it to us, there is another source that we should seek it from, and that, my friends, as James puts it, is God. If we're looking for guidance in life or clarity on decisions that need to be made, God is our ultimate source of wisdom. And as he says here, he is more than willing to share it with us. The tricky part, it seems, James teaches us, is knowing how to differentiate God's wisdom from the wisdom that the world teaches us. And he poses the question, where do we place our faith in? Is it in God, or do we dilute his wisdom by combining it with other sources? Back in the Old Testament, King Solomon asked God for wisdom, and God gave it to him abundantly. A great story is told to us how he used it in one of these times when these two women, they both wanted to be mothers. Maybe you know the story. They both bore babies, but one of them, in this horrible accident, she lost her child. And in the dark of night, the grieving lady, she went and stole the other mother's baby and pretended that it was her own. But the real mother knew that it was truly her baby. So in a system with no DNA testing to provide the answer, they went to the king to plead their case. Solomon said, well, the solution is right in front of us and very easy. And he whips out a sword and he says, here, cut the baby in two, and now you'll both have a part. You'll both have a baby. And that might seem a little bit simplistic and barbaric, of course, but the wisdom in that was amazing. Because the fake mother agreed to it. She was that desperate. But the real mother would not want her baby harmed, and so she said, no, that's fine. Let the baby stay with the other lady. And Solomon, because of that, figured that it was only the real mother who would care that much for the child. Problem solved. Today, of course, there would be a court battle, there would be lawyers involved, the kid would be placed in foster care, probably would become an adult before things were finally settled and resolved. But God provided the wisdom to make a difficult but smart decision. And this is where James is going here in his words about having your faith in the right place. Because there is wisdom that comes to us from our world, where we live, the people that we're around. I mean, we're taught from the time we're very, very young that if we want to be happy, then we should become successful, right? We need to have lots of education. We need to get to the top, make lots of money, buy lots of things. But you know something? Remember that Solomon guy we were just talking about? Lots of wisdom? He had some divided loyalties. He had great wisdom, but he didn't always use it to make smart choices. He used his position as king to attain everything our world says that we need to have in order to have a fulfilling life. He had authority, status, power, servants at his beck and command. He had incredible wealth. He owned anything and everything money could buy him. He had a PlayStation 5 before anybody else did. Literally, he lived in a palace. And the women, more wives and concubines than you could count. Solomon made Hugh Hefner look like a choir boy, people. He experienced every form of pleasure. He tried it all. And at the end of his life, this is what his wisdom finally taught him. He said all that he collected, amounted, had, it was all meaningless. Utterly meaningless. Finding hope and peace and joy in all the things the world says that we should be chasing after, he said it was like chasing the wind. Pursuing something you can never catch or keep. So what holds any meaning? Well, godly wisdom taught Solomon this. He said at the end, if you want meaning, my friends, fear God and keep his commandments. That's it. But our world screams at us otherwise, doesn't it? We're bombarded with supposedly wise words telling us what will truly make us happy and satisfied. And yet, without God, nobody right person to complete them. Sorry, Tom Cruise. Do you find it a coincidence how many Hollywood marriages fall apart? I mean, look at that media circus that pirate guy and his ex lately, Don't they seem happy? But the answer, as James puts it so clearly here, is found in having a faith in God alone. Because with that, my friends, with that comes a wisdom that will show us what is really and truly important. Every summer for years, I took a preaching course from a man I just loved learning from him. Just sat at his feet every summer, taking everything in. Dr. Jeff Snell, he came to Maritime Christian College to help us preachers hone our homiletic skills. And over time, we became friends and we talked quite a bit about things in life and ministry and all that. I appreciated his ability to make the Word of God just come alive and to draw things from it that I just never really thought about before. But one summer, I was honestly struggling with ministry. I was tired, I was frustrated with people, with the church, with the leadership that didn't want to move forward. And so we went for lunch one day. We went to Sam's, and over a delicious burger, he asked me to share how I was doing. And I dumped out my feelings of anger and bitterness, of how people were so focused on what they liked and what they wanted, and how leaders were more concerned with making people happy than reaching a new generation for Christ. And he listened to my righteous rant, never interrupting me once, just nibbled on his fries as I rambled on and on with what was wrong with the church. And finally, I finished, and I asked him what he thought I should do. Of course, anticipating great support of me and my problems, and imagining how his years of experience dealing with similar church issues would now be unleashed for me to hear and bring back to fight the good fight. He took a sip of his water, he swallowed it, he drew in a breath, and he said, "Sometimes our suffering helps us appreciate more and learn from the suffering that Jesus experienced for us." He could have punched me in the face, and I would not have felt it. And I never forgot that wisdom. Godly wisdom. Jesus suffered when he certainly did not have to in order to take care of my sin problem. My suffering in the moment hardly compares. And it's helping me to become more like Jesus. My friends, search for wisdom. Ask for it from God. Because while this world seems to have an abundance of advice for us, in the end, that kind of wisdom is like chasing the wind. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this amazing advice given to us by James. And I pray that you will just help us to seek out the wisdom that you are so abundantly full of and so willing to give to us. If, God, we would just seek it out. We are bombarded with the wisdom that comes from our world that tells us other things, things that will make us happy, things that will complete us and bring us peace, Father. Yet so many for so long have chased after it and haven't got it because it's not there. So help us to search out the wisdom that only you provide and apply it to our lives so that others can see your peace and your joy in us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.